let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster. We are honored today to have a powerhouse guest, Phillippi Ryan. She is a USA Today best-selling author of 16 psychological thrillers. She has won some of the most prestigious awards in the genre, and that is not all. She is also an investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV and has won an unprecedented 37 Emmy Awards. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm so delighted. Thank you for all you do for books and reading and readers. It's really quite astonishing.
Well, it is my honor to do that. It has been a work of love, and we've seen just an overwhelming amount of support from our community for literacy because of it.
It's great. It just shows you how we can change lives by storytelling. And I love that. Embrace that in every way.
And let's talk a little bit about your latest novel, All This Could Be Yours. And I am reading it now, and oh my goodness, it has me on the edge of my seat.
I have author friends who say they're happy that they read it when they got home from book tour because it just creeps them out otherwise. It's so interesting. It's such a fun, such a meta, such a super personal novel for me. You know, Harlan Coben told me to write the kind of books you love to read. So I love fast-paced, page-turning thrillers about smart women who sort of get the rug pulled out from under them. And that's exactly what happens in All This Could Be Yours. All This Could Be Yours stars Tessa Calloway, who's a woman so much like many of us. She's smart, she's successful, she has a good job, she has a wonderful, we think, husband, she has adorable children. But one day she's just had it with the corporate world, and live on Instagram, she just quits. She just walks out. She says, I've had it with being invisible. I've had it with being ignored. I'm going to follow my dreams and live my one life and write a novel. So as the book opens 3 years later, Tessa has a surprise best-selling novel. It is so successful beyond anyone's wildest imagination. And she's sent by her publisher on a glamorous nationwide book tour where she's met with long lines and happy fans and happy bookstores. And it's everything she always wanted. But she soon begins to realize that she has a stalker, someone who is trying to ruin her career and destroy her darling family that she's left back home. And she has to escape from whoever this is, or she'll lose everything she loves. So what starts out as a glamorous nationwide book tour turns into a dangerous, deadly cross-country cat and mouse chase with the author running for her life. Just like real book tour, right, Jess?
Oh, exactly. And I have to ask you, I know that you're an investigative journalist, and your reporting has changed lives, it's changed laws. Does that impact how you write?
You know, and you know this so well. There is nothing better than to have someone say, oh, what a good story. What a great story. What a riveting, propulsive, unputdownable story that is. And that's exactly what I do in my investigative reporting. I like that I have a character who you care about with an important problem that demands to be solved, a high stakes problem that demands to be solved, where the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. And in the end, you want some justice and you want to change the world a little bit. And that's what I've done in all these years as an investigative reporter. And that's exactly what I'm looking for in my crime fiction. I'm looking for a great story. You know, I don't want you to turn the channel when my stories are on TV, right? And I want you to miss your stop on the bus when you're reading my books, right? I want them to be entertaining and propulsive and riveting. And I want them to change your life, that at the end of the novel, you not only think, oh, I never saw that coming, and I wish I could have figured that out, but I never could have. And also, that's that's exactly how this book should have ended. I want you to feel inspired and empowered and stronger, and like we do have some control over our lives and over justice and having the right thing happen in the end. So it's all about storytelling, a good story with a beginning, middle, and an end, and one that you absolutely cannot put down.
I love how at the end of each chapter, you leave a little nugget for us. So you have to go to the next chapter. You can't put it down.
I love that. And it's interesting because isn't that how our real lives are as well? You know, my husband and I don't celebrate the anniversary of the day we met. We celebrate the anniversary of the day before we met. And we call that You Never Know Day because you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. And that's such a tenet of storytelling, isn't it? That something amazing is about to happen in crime fiction, for better or for worse, and we never know. But I don't know what's going to happen next when I write my novels. And that's what gets me to the computer every day is I think, ooh, I can't wait to find out what happens. And the only way I can find that out is by coming to the computer and writing the rest of the story. So I think my stories are very relatable. They're very realistic. They're just like our real lives. And I love to have my readers think, I wonder what I would do in this circumstance. I would do exactly what Tessa does in this circumstance. And I hope she succeeds. So I want you to it's interesting. I was talking to a fellow writer the other day, and he said that writing a good book is where the author creates a dream and then invites the reader to live in that dream. And I think that's so lovely. And that's exactly what I try to do in my stories as well. And All This Could Be Yours, which just made the USA Today bestseller list, an instant USA Today bestseller, I am delighted to say. I knew at the beginning I had a relatable, wonderful mom and wife who wanted a new career. I wanted her to go after her follow her dreams. I knew she would be on book tour, and I knew she would have made a Faustian bargain, what really felt like a deal with the devil. And that was what was threatening her life and career. And that's all I had. That's all I had. So I typed the letters chapter 1, and then I think, okay, let's see what happens next. 99,000 words to go. And that's a tightrope. That's a juggle. That's a balance because you have to have this wild faith in the writing process, don't you? That I know what a story is. I know a story has a beginning, middle, and end. Those 37 Emmys I've won, every single one of those is a story around a secret. And so I know that that is what my crime fiction is as well. A riveting story wrapped around a secret and what will happen when that secret is told. But what happens next? When people say to me, wow, those reveals, those twists and turns in your book, you really surprised me. I'm like, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? I surprise myself every day. I surprise myself every day. And that's what Sue Grafton used to call the magic, the magic of storytelling, that we as human beings can create something out of nothing but our own imagination. And that is really special.
And I think being a journalist, it helps you with that storytelling because when you're doing like your investigative reports, there's often a reveal in there. And I can understand why you're not a big outliner. It's because when you're reporting, you base a lot on the interviews that you do. You can't pre-write that story.
Yes, you're so wise, and that is so exactly right. And you totally know the deal, of course, about reporting and journalism. But it's exactly the same with an investigative story. I start an investigative story with a premise, with a question, with an idea, with something that has piqued my curiosity. And then I think I need to go find out whether this is true. I need to discover the rest of the story. So I'm out following leads and tracking down clues and doing research and going to public documents. And exactly as you said, doing interviews with people. I'm out in search of the story. And of course, in an investigative story, I don't know the ending of that story. If I knew the end, it wouldn't be new, right? It wouldn't be news. So I'm looking for something that's new. And I have learned over 43 years as an investigative reporter that I never know what's going to happen next. And I'm honestly open to whatever it is and honestly open to discovering what that story might be. So the process I use as an investigative reporter, all those tracking down clues, following leads, kind of like a detective, is exactly what I do in my crime fiction. It's just that in my crime fiction, instead of following leads and tracking down clues and doing interviews with real people and using their real sound bites and using their real settings, I'm investigating my own imagination. I'm looking in my own imagination, researching in my own imagination for my own experiences, for my own hopes and dreams and fears and terrors, my own curiosity. I'm doing the same kind of research. I'm just doing it in my head. It's amazing. It's quite amazing.
It really is amazing. And how do you balance it all?
Ha, yeah, balance. I don't know. How does anyone balance it all? I think when I was a little kid, my mom would say to me, when I had a question, my mom would say to me, why don't you go and find out, discover what the answer is, and then you come back and tell me. And sort of my mom's guidance has followed me all these years. When I remember when I was in the midst of writing my first novel, Primetime, um, I realized I had no idea what I was doing. To write my first novel was quite a moment. But when I was started doing it, I realized that I had no idea what I was doing. And I called my mom, as we all do if we're lucky. And I said, Mom, I love this book. I think it's going to be great, but I have this big job as a television reporter, and writing a book is very, very difficult. And I'm not sure how I can juggle it. I'm not sure if I can finish this. And my mom paused, and then she said, well, dear, you will if you want to. And isn't that perfect? Isn't that right? Isn't that it? It's all about my passion, my compulsion, my obsession, my determination, my desire to write that book, my desire to balance my life. And I think we all can learn from my mom, right? We go after what we want. We do what we want. We can make it happen if we want to. And that is exactly what Tessa Calloway does in All This Could Be Yours. She has a dream. She's determined to follow her dream. She says, I have one life. I'm a mom with dreams. I have one life, and I'm going to do this. So I think there's a lot, in life, there's a lot of luck, there's a lot of timing, there are many things that we can't predict and we can't control, but we can predict and we can control our own passion and our own desires and our own yearnings to follow our dreams. And that's what I do, and that's what Tessa Calloway does in All This Could Be Yours.
And isn't it amazing how sometimes you just need to call your mom and get a pep talk?
Yeah, I hear her voice every day. I wish I could tell her she was right, but I think she already knew that.
I think she did. And how long does it take you to write? How long did it take you to write your first book? And now that you are in and you're a best-selling author, is the process faster or is it the same?
Oh, it's very different, I have to say. It's very different from the beginning. When I started writing my first book, it was so amazing. I was at Channel 7 and I was just doing research for a big investigative story, and I just had a good idea for a novel. I knew it was a good idea. And I came home and I said to my husband, sweetheart, I've got a great idea for a novel. I'm going to write a thriller. And Jonathan says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a book? I said, how hard can it be? I've read a million books. Well, obviously, I soon learned how hard it could be, but I was so determined, as I said. I was absolutely obsessed. And I think that first book took maybe a year and a half to write. But you have to remember that at that point, when I wrote my first novel, I was 55. That was 20 years ago. But I've been in television for maybe 30 years at that time. And I think of all the stories I'd written as a reporter before I started writing fiction. So it wasn't as if I came to it without knowing anything about the power of storytelling or the concept of storytelling or the rhythm or the architecture or the music of storytelling. I knew how to do it. It was just whether I could make stuff up. So I just powered my way through that first book. I was thinking, oh, I'm a natural, I got this. And my first draft, you won't believe this, my first draft of my first book was 723 pages.
Wow.
Exactly. I had to cut 400 pages. I had to cut 400 pages. So now fast forward to All This Could Be Yours, which is my 16th book. It's a completely different proposition now. It takes a year to write a book from beginning to end because that's what my contract says. So if I have till November the 1st to write this next book, that's when the book will be done. So as my career has progressed, I've learned so much about writing along the way. I've learned what I'm going to cut. I've learned what's tangential, what's peripheral, what's derivative, what's me showing off and trying to be a really good writer that gets cut, trying to be funny, too much description. I've learned as I write what doesn't belong in the novel. I've learned just to write that absolutely gorgeous trunk of the novel tree where everything matters, where everything makes a difference, where the action is propulsive and page turning and you cannot put it down. It's easy to sort of type away and think, oh, I'm so talented, but it's not the book. So I've learned to raise the bar on myself, to challenge myself to be even smarter and better and faster and more riveting and more propulsive, to tell a deeper, richer, better story. And it's actually, and I don't know if this sounds strange, it's actually more difficult now than it was when I started because I think, frankly, I know more. I know more than I did when I started. And I'm always trying to be better. I'm always trying to challenge myself. I'm always trying to make each book be better than the last. And that's part of the joy of it. And that's part of how my life has changed after all these years of being a writer. I'm in the midst of writing my next book right now.
Well, I think sometimes when we're first starting out, we're blissfully unaware. And I cannot wait to read your next novel, You Just Don't Quit. Can you give us a sneak peek or is it top secret?
It's a little bit top secret. It doesn't even have a title yet, but because it's you, I will tell you if you don't tell anybody. I will tell you it's about a mysterious plane crash, a missing influencer, an adorable 11-year-old girl, and a writer who is searching for happy endings. So if you have a good title for that, I would love to know it. We're looking for one right now.
We'll think about that. We'll think about a title. And when will that one come out?
That comes out September the 1st of 2026, a date that I can't even conceive of now. But I'm on the road, doing book tour for All This Could Be Yours right now, and it's pretty funny, I have to say, to be an author on book tour with a book called All This Could Be Yours, which is about an author on book tour with a book called All This Could Be Yours. So if that isn't meta, if that isn't personal, I don't know what is. I burst into tears when I finally finished All This Could Be Yours because it isn't just a fast-paced cat and mouse chase. It's turned out to be a love letter to readers and a love letter to writers and a love letter to bookstores and librarians and libraries and people like you who communicate with us about new books, who are part of this book community. And it turned out to be not just a thriller, but such a touching personal journey for me. I can't wait to hear what you think about the end of it.
I know. I can't wait to get to the end of it as well. But then it'll be over, and that makes me sad too.
Well, thank you. I love, that moment of the ending of the book. And as I said, I don't know the endings when I'm writing the novel. I don't know. So that moment, I mean, I'll tell you, when I thought of the ending of All This Could Be Yours, I was by myself in this very study and I stood up and applauded. I'm like, yes, you've got this. And then I thought, Hank, just sit down, sit down. But it was a real moment of joy.
I love that. We talked about a love letter to libraries, bookstores, readers. Have you noticed that there is a renewed love for reading?
Have you seen that? I couldn't agree with you more. I was thinking about this just the other day, and you're so wise about this. Somehow, reading got cool again, and novels got cool again, and bookstores and libraries and author events got cool again. I never cease to be overjoyed by the passion and the love that I'm seeing from book world and reader world right now. People are so smart and so wise, and readers are just embracing the idea of, you know what it is? I think that the world is so complicated and the world is so unpredictable now that the idea that we can go to a library or a bookstore and pick up a book and turn to a stranger and say, "Have you read this?" And they'll say, "Oh, yes, I love that book." Or, "If you like that book, you should read this book." I think we've realized that there's a joy and a sort of sense of empathy in the possibility of sharing stories with people. It's such a time honored thing, isn't it? And I really agree with you that there's a renewal of love for that right now. And I just think it's the best thing that could possibly happen.
I do too. It brings me so much joy to see that. And let's talk a little bit about journalism because we are both journalists and we're seeing our industry rapidly changing as well.
It's a question of technology. I think it's a question of splintering of the outlets also. I mean, I remember back in the day when you had to get up to change the channel, not there was no click, 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 and there were only three news broadcasts to watch, and you could choose among those three networks, or four if you turned two dials and it was all fuzzy and they had cartoons. But now I think there's so many opportunities and so many availabilities of news outlets that people are overwhelmed with the volume of information. And it's very difficult sometimes for people to figure out what's commentary and what's actual journalism. And that's worrisome, I think, for all of us, because our goal as journalists is to bring you the truth, is to bring you the real objective look at the world. And I think that that's more and more difficult to come by these days. A true journalist is such a treasure, and I hope that we stay in existence as we have in the past.
I agree because it's so important. It's also so important for democracy to have a free press and to have journalists. And I like what you said about it's difficult for people to distinguish between commentary and true journalism because I've noticed that and I've had conversations with people about that.
Exactly. I mean, democracy thrives on sunlight and thrives on truth and thrives on knowledge. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that continues.
And I think seeing this resurgence in people loving to read and just picking up a book, that gives me hope for our industry as well, because I'm like, you know what? There are some principles that are time honored and aren't going to go away. And I feel like local journalism is one of those.
And you're so right. I think that's so wise because I do think that good fictional storytelling is all about curiosity. It's all about analytical thinking. It's all about motivation. And once we start thinking about those concepts in fiction, we can think about them more in real life as well. And we can ask, wait a minute, who benefits? Why are you saying that? Why would you say that? Why would you do that? Where did this come from? All that kind of curiosity and personal research can come into our real lives as well as we're trained to do it in crime fiction. It shows it all works together.
Hank, is there anything else that you want listeners or readers to know about you and your work?
You know, gosh, I'm really the poster child for following your dreams in midlife. I didn't start writing fiction until I was 55. I won 30 Emmys by that time. I'd been a reporter for a long time. I've changed laws and changed lives. Wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise. And as you say, changed laws and changed lives. I've gotten millions of dollars in refunds and restitution for victims. I've gotten people's homes out of foreclosure. But at that moment that I had a good idea for a novel, my life really changed. And I could have said, I'm fine, I have a great job, I have a great life, I don't need to write a novel. But I'd always wanted to write crime fiction. As a little girl, I'd always wanted to write about Miss Marple or write about Poirot and write those marvelous stories with fabulous, surprising endings. And because it took me 55 years to do it, didn't mean I shouldn't have done it. So I'm really the poster child, as I said, for following your dreams at midlife. If I hadn't said yes to myself, if I hadn't followed my dreams, just like Tessa does in All This Could Be Yours, none of this would have happened. So I like to think about being brave. I like to think about going for it. I like to think about that now that we're grown-ups and we have all this experience, why do we give up that bravery that we had when we were younger? I say now, this is the time to go for it. This is the time to follow your dreams because you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner.
And that is so inspiring. And I have not revealed this on this podcast before, but I have a dream of being an author as well. I want to write fiction in my life. That's a goal that I've had as a small child. So you're inspiring me today.
Let me give you one more thought for that because I think that's such an important and such a big moment that you're saying this. Sue Grafton told me once that she went into her first agent and said, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. This was years ago. Imagine how many years ago that was. And apparently her agent said, well, wow, I can't believe you're actually saying that. And she said, if you don't say it, it will never happen. If you don't own it, it will never happen. So there you have it. Sue Grafton promises you that your dream will come true.
We are owning it today.
We are owning it.
Hank, this has been so inspiring. You are amazing. And I just encourage everyone to pick up a copy of All This Could Be Yours because it is all that and more. You're not going to want to put it down. And thank you again. I know you have a busy schedule, but you took time for us.
I absolutely loved it. Thank you. I am so honored to be here. And again, thank you so much for all you do. It really makes a difference.
Well, thank you for all you do, and thank you to all of our listeners. You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading.